What would you do if the person you loved the most, the one you sacrificed everything for, ended up treating you like you didn't exist? I never imagined I'd be asking myself that question. From the moment my son was born, he became my entire world. Every dream I had, every plan I'd made for my own life, I pushed aside without hesitation. I told myself it was worth it, that one day all the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the empty bank account, the missed opportunities would be repaid in love, respect, and gratitude. But now, as I sit here in a house that feels emptier than ever, I can't help but wonder, did I make a terrible mistake? My son David was everything to me. I lived and breathed for him. I thought we had an unbreakable bond, one built on love, trust, and shared dreams. I envisioned a future where we'd always be close, where he'd grow up knowing that no matter what happened in life, his mother had his back. But life doesn't always unfold the way we expect. Somewhere along the way, the son I adored became distant, cold, almost indifferent. And now, after everything I've poured into raising him, he refuses to even acknowledge me. To him, I am no one. It's a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. This is my story, a story of love, sacrifice, heartbreak, and the devastating realization that sometimes, no matter how much you give, love is not always returned. Stay with me, because what happened between my son and me is something every parent should hear. I grew up in a simple home, nothing fancy, but filled with love and hard work. My parents always taught me that family comes first, no matter what. So, when I became a mother, I clung to that belief as my guiding star. The day David was born was the happiest and scariest day of my life. Holding him in my arms, I felt joy, pride, and overwhelming fear, because deep down, I knew I was stepping into motherhood alone. At first, my husband and I tried to make things work, but cracks appeared quickly. Financial pressures, constant arguments, late nights filled with silence and resentment. When David was 5, my husband walked out the door and never looked back. I stood there clutching my little boy's hand, feeling the weight of the world crashing down on my shoulders. Being a single mother wasn't just hard, it was relentless. There was no backup, no safety net. Every decision, every problem, every financial burden fell on me alone. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs, cleaning houses during the day, waiting tables at night, and sewing clothes to sell on weekends. I barely slept, barely ate, but I kept going because David needed me to. I watched other women my age build careers, travel, and even start new families. But my entire world revolved around one thing, making sure my son had a better life than I did. Every time I saw his smile, every time he hugged me and said, "I love you, Mom," it felt like the sacrifices were worth it. We had so many moments of joy, too. I was there for every school play, every parent-teacher meeting, every scraped knee. I cheered the loudest at his soccer games, stayed up late to help with science projects, and made his favorite meals, even when my feet were too swollen from standing all day. But the truth is, it was exhausting. There were nights I sat alone in the kitchen after David went to bed, staring at a pile of unpaid bills and crying silently, so he wouldn't hear. There were moments I felt like I was drowning, trapped in a cycle of working, worrying, and sacrificing, with no end in sight. As David grew older, I began to notice little changes. He became more independent, which I thought was natural, but also more distant. He started saying things like, "Mom, stop babying me," or, "You don't need to come to everything." It stung, but I told myself it was just part of growing up. Still, the pressure never let up. Every time a new challenge came, school fees, medical bills, even just keeping food on the table, I bore it alone. I smiled through the pain, told David everything was fine, and kept pushing forward. I didn't want him to see how hard it really was. how close we came to losing everything at times. By the time he hit his teenage years, the distance between us had grown wider. He spent more time with his friends, less time at home. He stopped telling me about his day, and when I tried to ask, I was met with shrugs or sighs of annoyance. The hardest part was watching him begin to resent the very things I thought were acts of love. I remember picking him up from school one afternoon, waving excitedly as I spotted him. He climbed into the car without a word, staring at his phone. When I gently asked, "Rough day, sweetheart," he snapped, "Can you just not talk right now?" My heart sank, but I stayed quiet. I kept telling myself he'd understand one day, that when he was older, he'd look back and realize just how much I had given up for him. But nothing could have prepared me for what was coming next. David's acceptance letter to one of the top universities in the country was supposed to be the proudest moment of my life. I remember holding that letter in my hands, tears streaming down my face, thinking to myself that every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ounce of energy I had poured into raising him had finally paid off. I imagined us celebrating together, hugging tightly, sharing that moment as mother and son, but that moment never came. David barely smiled when he told me the news. I remember asking, "Aren't you excited, sweetheart?" And he just shrugged. "Yeah, I guess it's just a lot right now." I brushed it off at the time, thinking maybe he was overwhelmed. I had no idea it was the beginning of a complete shift in our relationship. As he prepared to leave for college, he became more and more distant. He hardly ate dinner with me anymore, often locking himself in his room or spending nights out with friends. Every time I tried to talk to him, I was met with cold responses or worse, complete silence. I kept telling myself it was just the stress of a big life change, that once he settled into his new environment, things would go back to normal. But they didn't. David moved into his dorm, and within weeks it was like I had lost him completely. My calls went unanswered for days. Texts were left on read. When he did pick up, it was brief, mechanical. "I'm busy, Mom. I'll call later." But later never came. I tried to be patient. I sent care packages, little notes of encouragement, even money when I didn't have much to spare. I thought if I just kept showing up, kept reminding him that I was there. The first real blow came during his first semester break. I had cleaned the house, cooked all his favorite meals, and decorated the living room to welcome him home. I waited all day, pacing back and forth, checking my phone every few minutes. Evening fell, and still no sign of him. Finally, I called. When he picked up, his voice was cold. "Oh, I'm not coming home, Mom. I'm staying at a friend's place." It was stunned. "But David, I cooked your favorite dinner. I've been waiting for you all day." He sighed, sounding annoyed. "Mom, seriously, stop making everything such a big deal. I'm busy. I have my own life now." That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched food, tears falling into my lap. The silence in the house was deafening. For the first time, I felt like a guest in my own home, as if I no longer had a place in his life. But the worst was yet to come. A few months later, I decided to surprise him at college for his birthday. I bought a small cake and some balloons, excited to see his face light up. I had imagined it over and over, thinking he would be happy, maybe even a little embarrassed in front of his friends, but grateful. When I arrived at his dorm, I knocked and waited. After a long pause, he opened the door, looking completely shocked and not at all pleased. "What are you doing here?" he asked, keeping his voice low as he glanced nervously over his shoulder. I smiled, holding up the cake. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I wanted to surprise you." His face darkened. "Mom, you shouldn't have come. Seriously, this is too much." Before I could respond, one of his friends walked by and looked at me curiously. "Who's that?" David hesitated. Then, with a tight smile, he muttered, "Just someone I know." My heart broke in that instant. someone I know. After everything I had done for him, after pouring my entire life into raising him, I had been reduced to a stranger in his eyes, and I stood there frozen, feeling like I had been slapped. I forced a smile, handed him the cake, and whispered, "I'll go now. Happy birthday." He didn't even walk me out. I cried the entire way home, my chest aching like it had been crushed under 1,000 lb of weight. I replayed the scene over and over in my head, asking myself where it all went wrong. What had I done to deserve this? How could my own son, the boy I had loved more than anything in the world, treat me like this? In the following weeks, I tried to reach out, hoping we could talk about it. I texted him, called him, even wrote him a heartfelt email explaining how hurt I was, but he didn't reply. It was as if I no longer existed in his world. Friends and family tried to comfort me. "He's just going through a phase," they said. "He'll come around." But deep down, I knew this was more than a phase. This was a fracture that had grown too deep, a bond that had been stretched until it snapped. I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, haunted by memories of the little boy who used to wrap his arms around me and say I was his hero. Now that same boy couldn't even look me in the eye. And as much as it hurt, I was starting to realize that I couldn't keep chasing after someone who didn't want me in their life, even if that someone was my own flesh and blood. After months of silence, I was left feeling hollow and defeated. I had stopped trying to force conversations with David, because every unanswered message and ignored call only deepened the ache in my heart. I tried to distract myself, throwing my energy into work and reconnecting with old friends, but nothing could fill the void left by my son's absence. One evening, as I was cleaning out old boxes in the attic, I stumbled upon a dusty photo album. Flipping through the pages, I saw pictures of David as a baby, his tiny hand gripping my finger, his first birthday party, his graduation from elementary school. Each photo was a reminder of a time when he had needed me, loved me, looked at me like I was his whole world. I sat there for hours, tears falling onto the fragile pages, overwhelmed by the weight of everything we had lost. The next day, something unexpected happened. I received a phone call from Sarah, one of David's childhood friends. She sounded hesitant at first, but eventually said, "I think you deserve to know what's really going on with David." I froze. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "It's not that he doesn't love you. He talks about you sometimes, but not in the way you think. He feels suffocated. He's told us before that he feels like his whole life was mapped out by you, like he never got to make his own choices." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "I don't understand. I gave up everything for him. I wanted him to have the best." "I know," Sarah said gently, "but sometimes love can feel like pressure. Even if you mean well, he's struggling to figure out who he is outside of being your son." I thanked her, hung up, and sat in stunned silence. I had spent years pouring every bit of myself into raising David, thinking that was what love looked like. But had I unknowingly turned that love into a burden he couldn't carry? Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what Sarah had said. I replayed every memory, every conversation, searching for clues I had missed. And slowly, painfully, I began to see the patterns. The times I had pushed David to join clubs he didn't want to. The way I insisted on certain subjects in school because I thought they were best for him. The way I constantly hovered, afraid to let him fail, afraid to let him make his own mistakes. What I thought was devotion, he saw as control. One night I sat down and wrote David a long letter. I didn't blame him. I didn't beg for anything. I simply told him the truth. I told him how much I loved him, how proud I was of the man he was becoming, and most importantly, how sorry I was if my love had ever made him feel trapped or pressured. I wrote that I was stepping back, that I would always be here when he was ready, but I would no longer try to force my way into his life. I mailed the letter and waited. Days turned into weeks with no response. Part of me feared I had lost him forever, but another part of me felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time, I was letting go, truly letting him decide what kind of relationship he wanted with me. Then one quiet Sunday morning, my phone buzzed. My heart raced when I saw his name on the screen. I hesitated, my fingers trembling before finally picking up. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice softer than I had heard in years. I swallowed hard. "Hi, sweetheart. It's good to hear your voice." There was a long pause. Then he said, "I got your letter. I've read it a few times. I just needed time to think." I held my breath, unsure what would come next. "I didn't realize how much you were carrying," he continued. "I guess I was so focused on how I felt that I didn't think about your side of things." Tears welled up in my eyes. "It's okay, David. I only ever wanted what was best for you. But I see now that I should have trusted you to find your own way." Another pause. "I want to work on things, Mom. I don't know how long it will take, but I want us to get back to a better place." Relief and hope flooded through me in equal measure. "That's all I've ever wanted, David. I'm here whenever you're ready." We talked for a little while longer, carefully, tentatively, like people trying to rebuild a bridge that had long been broken. When the call ended, I sat back and closed my eyes, letting the tears fall freely. The twist was not just in realizing that David had been hurting too. The real twist was learning that love, no matter how pure, can be misunderstood if we don't give each other room to breathe. I had to face the hard truth that sometimes in trying to protect the ones we love, we end up holding them too tightly. And now, for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were on the path to healing. In the weeks and months after that phone call, things between David and me remained delicate. We exchanged occasional texts, short and polite, nothing like the conversations we once had. There were no grand reunions, no sudden healing of old wounds, but there was a shift, a small crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. I learned to hold back my impulses. I stopped flooding his phone with messages and let him reach out when he felt ready. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done, to step back from someone I love so fiercely. But I knew it was the right thing. I had spent years gripping so tightly that I never gave him the freedom to find his own path. Over time, David started sharing little pieces of his life again. A quick update about his classes, a photo of his new apartment, a random text saying, "Hope you're doing okay, Mom." They were small gestures, but each one felt like a fragile thread, stitching us back together bit by bit. I began focusing on myself more, too. For the first time in decades, I started to ask myself who I was outside of being David's mother. I took a painting class, something I had always dreamed of, but never made time for. I joined a local community group and made new friends. I allowed myself to enjoy things without guilt, without feeling like I needed to justify every second of my time. The process was slow, and there were setbacks. There were weeks when I didn't hear from David at all, and my heart would ache with the familiar weight of worry and sadness. But each time, I reminded myself that healing is not a straight line. It is messy and uncomfortable, but it is worth it. One day, out of the blue, David called and said he wanted to come home for a visit. I tried to keep my excitement in check, telling him that of course he was welcome any time. I spent the whole day cleaning the house, cooking his favorite meals, and setting everything up like I used to when he was little. When he walked through the door, it felt like time had rewound for a brief moment. He hugged me, a little awkward at first, but real, and sat down at the table as we shared a quiet meal. We didn't talk about the past or rehash old arguments. Instead, we talked about his studies, his friends, and small everyday things. It was simple, but it felt like a small miracle. After dinner, as we sat in the living room, there was a pause in the conversation. David looked at me and said softly, "Mom, I want to thank you for everything. I know I've been distant, and I know I hurt you. I was angry and confused, but I never stopped loving you. Tears filled my eyes. I reached out and held his hand, squeezing it gently. I know, sweetheart, and I'm sorry too. I should have trusted you more to find your own way. We sat there in silence for a while, letting the weight of those words settle. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning, a fragile new start built on honesty, understanding, and mutual respect. Looking back now, I realized that love is not just about sacrifice. It is about balance, about knowing when to hold on and when to let go. I had spent so many years believing that my worth as a mother was tied to how much I gave up for David. But I see now that true love also means giving the people we care about the space to grow, even if it means they move away from us for a time. The scars of those painful years will never fully disappear, but they have taught me valuable lessons. I have learned to find joy outside of my role as a mother. I have learned to nurture my own dreams and to be proud of the woman I am, not just the sacrifices I have made. David and I are still working on our relationship. It is not perfect, and it may never be what it once was, but it is real and honest, and that is enough for me. I know now that love cannot be forced or earned through endless self-sacrifice. It must be freely given and freely returned. To anyone out there who has sacrificed everything for someone they love, only to be met with silence or rejection, I want you to know this. Your worth is not defined by someone else's appreciation. You are valuable because of who you are, not because of what you have given up. As for me, I will always love my son, but now I also love myself. And that is the most important healing of